Do you want to be a sneaky motherfucker in Dragonflight Alpha with the Subtlety Rogue and the new talents, the potential build that can flourish in a wonderful spec in Dragonflight, or will it? And that's what we are going to be talking about today. Subtlety Rogue, ladies and gentlemen, and what talent has Sub gotten so far, and what work needs to be done to make sure that they're doing good, because I'm not gonna lie, some of them are buggy, but we're gonna check all of that in a second. First, if you like our content and you want to support us a bit more, and maybe you want to dress up for the occasion, check out our public link down in the description where we have merch, t-shirts, such as t-shirts, that's the proper word, it's a Romanian accent, don't worry about it. We have this stuff there that you can get with all sorts of logos and cool designs made by Marcelian. You know, because I'm not Marcelian, I just like to press buttons on keyboards, but he is the creative genius in terms of aesthetics and has made really cool stuff that you can put on t-shirts, on mugs, on pins, on cases, phone cases, laptop cases, all sorts of stuff that you can get down in the link down below. And obviously you'll be supporting the content that we make, pretty much every daily video that we have on Dragonflight Alpha, or tier lists, or class guides, or podcasts, or streams, and all of that, since we are hitting it hard in Dragonflight. And hey, if you want to represent and have some cool swag like this, oh look, on cooldown, it's pretty nice, right? Yeah, hit us up, check the public link down below, and let's talk about Subtlety Rogue. This is not the first Rogue video that we have right now, so I will not go too deep into the general Rogue talents, by the way, but I will cover a couple that might pop out in your head. Obviously, we're not going to talk about, you know, the defensives and the utility and all the Rogue toolkit that pretty much have been available for over a decade. But if you do look on the right hand side of the general talent tree, you will notice that it is very sub-focused, since it does end in Find Weakness and right below to the capstone Shadow Dance. Now, obviously, Find Weakness is a core part of Subtlety Rogue, and it's kind of very hard not to take this. Maybe there is a reason, a world, a build that you might be able to go to and ignore Find Weakness, but likely you'll never want to ignore Shadow Dance. This is a contentious topic right now, putting Shadow Dance, which is the core cooldown for Subtlety, something that it's like... As a new rogue, I cannot really see how Subtlety will function without Shadow Dance, clearly, but obviously you can get it. But every other rogue can get it, but I don't know if this is a, let's say, an even trade-off. Anyway, you do have this, and the reason I'm saying that there might be a world where you would sacrifice Find Weakness, because on the left-hand side you have good stuff like Lethality and Seal Fate, which is closer to the capstone Thistletea, and nobody talks about Thistletea anymore. Those are also really good talents that you can take, and of course, if you're not gonna go with Seal Fate, and pretty much whatever path you go, you can still go down the middle and take Improved Ambush, which, I mean, it's probably going to be, I'm assuming, mandatory to an extent, because it's just really easy to get compared to everything else. You can get Improved Ambush and go to either side of the tree, unless there's a world where you can get both Shadow Dance and go on the left-hand side and get some valuable points there, but we'll see how that plays out in the long run. But that's pretty much the main things that could work in the general talent tree. Obviously, there's a lot more talents that are good. I'm not gonna go over all of them. Night Stalker, Subterfuge, blah, 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 all of that stuff. But let's actually check the Subtlety tree spec, and this is where it becomes slightly weird. Now, most of the weirdness comes from the fact that the tuning is what it is, where the generators deal more damage than the finishers. Now, you would say, well, you press more generators than finishers anyway. Well, that might be the case, but when a generator deals 80–90% of a finisher's damage, or even more sometimes, that becomes slightly weird. And obviously that's tuning, obviously that will change. It's still alpha, we're gonna get beta soon, and you know, beta is gonna be tested, and by the end of the beta we're gonna have like proper numbers set up. But that's basically the feeling that you get, because that influences the kind of build that you make. So let's actually talk quickly about the talents. If you look, it's spread out kind of evenly, although it's kind of hard to cross path between things, but you will probably start on the right hand side if you will eventually want to do any sort of Mythic Plus. And you will see your, you know, usual suspects, Black Powder, which is very early into the tree, which is really good. It's kind of something, I feel like it's, was added in Shadowlands to the end of beta. At the beginning of the beta, there was like no AoE, and then they added an AoE, and then they renamed it to Black Powder. And I digress. It is Black Powder, the one that you know so far. And obviously you can go to Silent Storm further down, but there are a couple that will pull your attention. Veiled Touch is the first one, and that makes your abilities deal 10% increased magic damage. And this is kind of the theme of this side of the talent tree. Sure, it's AoE, but it's also magic, or rather shadow damage focused, which is kind of important for a melee spec, since a lot of melee specs obviously do physical damage, and mobs and bosses have armor. So that's usually where you want Find Weakness to bypass some of that armor and increase your damage. However, obviously shadow damage is not mitigated by armor, so that's pretty good. I don't know how this will affect Find Weakness depending on your damage profile, but that's neither here nor there. And if you keep going down the same path, you will see Replicating Shadows, which, you know, Rupture deals an additional 30% damage as shadow and applies to one additional enemy within 8 yards. This is not yet implemented on alpha, so we cannot really tell, but maybe this is a response to Subtlety rather's issue with low target count cleave. It's not the tier set that we have right now, so it still feels very lacking, but maybe it's better than nothing. I would really like to see more of this implemented throughout the talent tree, but we'll see what happens in the future. Obviously, you'll go down to Shadowed Finishers, which makes Eviscerate and Black Powder deal an additional 20% damage as shadow to targets with your Find Weakness active. So even if you want to do more magic damage that's not mitigated by armor, you'll still want Find Weakness to mitigate to eliminate some of that armor and also increase your shadow damage, which is weird. Maybe this is how they said, okay, you cannot really not want Find Weakness. So yeah, I suppose some of the things might actually be set in stone, which maybe it's a good thing, maybe not, but it definitely eliminates part of the choosing your thing, right? Because you cannot really play Shadowed Finishers without Find Weakness. I mean it would just not work unless it changes, but we'll see. And if you keep going down, you'll see Deeper Daggers, which is the colony that we have right now. Eviscerate and Black Powder increases your shadow damage dealt by 15% for 8 seconds. And considering how fast-paced Subtlety feels now with, you know, a low eye level count, low haze, low crit, low, all of that, you probably will be able to maintain 100% uptime on this. I cannot see how you cannot generate 5 combo points within 8 seconds, so there's that. And going down, you'll notice Deeper Stratagem, but Finality, the legendary, is also here, which is actually kind of good. It's a nice legendary, it's a fun legendary, it kind of feels right in the hands of sub. I'm glad to see this year. It's a 2-pointer though, so you know, you will have to spend a little bit. And we go to the capstone, which is Dark Brew. Your attacks that deal nature or bleed damage now deal shadow damage instead, and all of the shadow damage that you do is increased by 20%. This obviously applies to your poisons, to your rupture as well, and pretty much it's going to be physical and shadow. Physical and shadow. No more bleed actually, which is also physical, that's also going to be shadow, so it's kind of good. It bypasses a lot of armor. It's looking like it's going to be, I mean, it's obviously good in AoE, but I can see how this can be good in single target as well, although I don't know how much of this side of the tree you will want for single target, because it's clearly designed to be AoE, and a lot of the cool single target stuff are also on the left-hand side. But then again, you know, the talent tree is subject to change, so what we're looking at right now is basically what we have to work with. Maybe by, you know, talking a little bit about this, we can add a little bit of feedback or some perspective at the very least, because, you know, there's definitely bigger brains out there. There are also a couple of dead end talent points, or talent nodes rather, that I kind of like how this approach feels for Subtlety right now. And you obviously have Secret Technique, Shuriken, Storm, and Flagellation. They're all AoE abilities. Well, Flagellation's, you know, the Venthyr Covenant ability, which it's a weird one because I'm not sure if it's that good without Obedience, since Obedience made it really, really good. I guess it all comes down to numbers, and it's weird because it's in the tooltip right now it's buffing Mastery, and Mastery is supposed to buff finishers, and this is a finisher row, and even with the finisher row right now, it comes down to tuning, because it's not very impressive right now, even though that this tree does slightly more damage. And if we go to the middle side of the tree, you'll see something more core towards Subtlety. You'll see basic cooldowns and passives and mechanics that you're familiar with. I'm not gonna go into all of them because you already have them in your spellbook or in your talents. A couple of things that might pique your interest are closer to the bottom side, where you have Lingering Shadow, which makes, you know, after Shadow Dance ends, your Backstab or Gloomblade, if you have talented into it, deals additional 50% damage as Shadow, fading by 0.4% per second, which, if the tooltip indicates properly, feels like it's going to drop off entirely in about, what, 120 something seconds? Math, I don't know, I'm not a math major, but considering how fast you're gonna have Shadow Dance, likely this will never drop. The buff to your Backstab, making it really strong, which is good, mostly because on the left-hand side you have a lot of Backstab buffers, and we will get into that in a second. And if you go to the capstone, you have Shadow Mist, which right now is not yet implemented on Alpha, so it's very hard to tell how this functions in practice, but in theory, gaining Stealth Vanish or Shadow Dance expels Shadow Mist nearby. Like, we don't know what that is. You walk through the Shadow Mist to refresh the cooldown of Shadow Step and supercharge a combo point, so basically Echoing Reprimand, and then damaging finishing moves that consume the same number of combo points as your supercharge function as if they consumed 7 combo points. So again, it's kind of, I don't know if I want to call it a budget Echoing Reprimand, but it's at least an Echoing Reprimand that adds extra conditions for you to be able to take advantage of the supercharge. And I don't know, maybe this feels more like a PvP thing, because if you really want supercharged combo points, you can just go and take Echoing Reprimand, and if the supercharged combo points are going to be good enough for Subtlety, then that just comes down again to tuning, and it does compete with Dark Brew, which is on the right-hand side, and the Rotten, which is on the left-hand side, and we will touch on that in a second. So this is a weird one, definitely feels more PvP than PvE, but if it is going to be balanced around PvE, I would be surprised to see, I guess, because I don't know, man. I'm not a fan of the supercharged combo points, especially for sub that generates combo points a little bit, not randomly, but a little bit chaotically. You can kind of track them, but it's probably harder for sub to nail those supercharged combo points than it is for other specs. And we go to the left-hand side, and there you will see the generator type of funnels. Obviously starts with improved ambush, but if we keep going down, I talk for a living, guys, it's fine. If you keep going down, you'll see symbols there, which is, I guess, sure, symbols is again kind of really part of your core play style and, you know, toolkit of Subtlety, so having it in a very specific side of the talent tree feels a little bit weird, because you can obviously just not ever take it, but it's, I mean, it's a really good cooldown. Obviously with planned execution, it works really well, and with inevitability on to boot, really buffs, you know, that playstyle into making your basically on inevitability Backstab and Shadow Strike deal additional 93 damage, which is the tooltip, but it's the wow hit tooltip. It's fine. It deals more damage and extends the duration of Symbols of Death, which works again with planned execution, giving you more critical strike chance while Symbols of Death is active. So that's nice. That's obviously they work in conjunction. And you do have Perforated Veins. Shadow Strike increases the damage of your next Backstab, or if you talent it to Gloomblade, because Gloomblade is also really good, and by 35% and stacks up to 3 times. So if you play a really organized and really meticulous and probably really managed with a lot of weak auras, Subtlety, as long as the tuning doesn't really scale out of control, you'll hit really strong, let's say, Gloomblades, because if you're not going to be playing here, you're probably going to take Gloomblade anyway. It's going to hit really hard, and I mean, that's cool. And we keep going down to finalize the generator fantasy is the Rotten. And the Rotten, essentially what it does is, after activating Symbols of Death, your next Shadow Strike or Backstab deals 50% increased damage, generates 4 additional combo points, and is a guaranteed critical strike. Now, obviously, if you use symbols with Shadow Dance, you're gonna use Shadow Strike, and if you play Improved Ambush, that's gonna be a whole lot of combo points. Likely, you might want both Deeper Stratagem talents to have the maximum amount of combo points, 7 combo points, I believe, gets you 5 with 1, yeah, 5 with extra 2, that's 7. It's basic math. I didn't fail math, I promise you guys. It's interesting. It's definitely a different flavor. It's still weird since Subtlety feels like it should be the finisher spec of the 3, I mean, your mastery increases the damage of your finishers, but this feels like a little bit of a cognitive dissonance between your mastery, which is supposed to dictate your damage profile. I mean, that's what it would probably sound like, but instead, if you go this route, you'll have a lot of damage as generators, which, I mean, it's good, but then again, the generators are not influenced by your mastery unless the mastery changes. So we'll see exactly how this plays out in once the spec releases. I like the concept of different playstyles and having variety. It also has to be able to kind of make sense. So it all comes down to damage, because it doesn't really matter what type of flavor it has if it has 0 damage, right? And obviously you have a lot of other talents that you might recognize. We're not gonna go into all of them, but overall, as conclusions, this was one of the harder talent trees to judge from the rogue class as a whole. Assassination is pretty straightforward. Outlaw is pretty straightforward at what it wants to do. Subtlety seems like it's pretty straightforward, but some of them are like, wait a minute. There's essentially a lot of bugs on the alpha as well that doesn't let us able to properly test them into practice, because we can kind of guess the theory, but you don't have 2 charges of Shadow Dance. The actual Shadow Dance talent in the Subtlety tree does not work, does not give you a charge of Shadow Dance. Improved Ambush also generates 102 combo points. Yeah, there's not extra anything. It's 102. It's a lot, right? So we cannot really judge exactly how this works. One of the deeper stratagem talents also doesn't work, at least at this point in the testing phase. So it's very hard to generate a perception about the flow of combo points to finishers and how that all plays out, even if you do play the generator side of the talent trees. And also there's bugs in tooltip, and some of them don't work as intended, some of them are not even implemented whatsoever, so there's still a little bit left to test out. Personally, after playing a couple of dungeons, I would have really loved to see something like the tier set added, even if it's like a harder to reach capstone, because there are certain dungeons and certain patterns in dungeons where you cannot really fight more than 3 targets at once, and maybe that's fine. Maybe you're not supposed to be able to fight massive AoE or big single target, but it still feels weird for Subtlety. Obviously, every DPS has its weakness, but out of all the DPSs that I've played so far, I don't feel like any DPS has had this weakness as strongly implemented as Subtlety, where in 3 targets you just kill 1 target. That's all you do. Maybe with replicating shadows you put 2 ruptures out and that's about it. But other than that, I mean, it would be nice to be able to optimize. Maybe if you trade off some like bigger AoE, maybe it can be like a choice node with black powder where you do something like massive damage to 3 targets or 4 targets and reduce damage past that. Who knows, maybe something like that. Or maybe Subtlety is doomed to never be able to do proper damage in cleave or small cleave encounters, and that's what you have to deal with. But right now, I mean, it's interesting. I had fun playing sub, but I still feel like something is missing. So likely in the next couple of weeks, we're gonna have more updates on the Subtlety talent tree, and some things will be shifted around, some things will be updated. Obviously, tuning will hit as well, so keep your eyes peeled on our channel, because as we're getting into the beta, we're probably gonna be able to test the specs better with also add-ons to see exactly how they do. Obviously, devs will be responding constantly to the feedback and adjusting everything, so it's going to be an interesting time to, you know, be a rogue. If you do want to main a rogue in Dragonflight, and to be honest, the more I play, the more I lean towards it. So it's growing on me, But thank you for watching the video so far. Once again, if you want to support the channel a bit more, check the merch link down below on TeePublic and get yourself a cool ass swaggy shirt. That is a word that I've just made up. Thank you, Patrons, for supporting the channel, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.